The first, of course, the most pressing is that there's a succession crisis.
Who's going to be in charge?
Who's going to be in charge? Joseph had sent most of the Quorum of the 12 out on electioneering missions and preaching missions, and so most of them are not in Nauvoo at the time of the martyrdom. And one of the ones who was there, John Taylor, isn't exactly in his best prime with half of his hip shot away, right? So the apostles are recalled, but it's very obvious very early on that there's going to be a difference of opinion of who is to lead the church. The one that we know most about is Sidney Rigdon. Sidney Rigdon, who was a member of the First Presidency. It's important to note that the First Presidency it's different than what it is today. Today, the idea to you that a member of the First Presidency could apostatize that's a pretty big deal, right? One of the reasons why it's different is that in these earlier days, the First Presidency were drawn from people that were actually outside of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So you have members of the First Presidency like John C. Bennett, who's not an apostle, thankfully. But today you wouldn't have that at all, right? Today you have the First Presidency is drawn from the apostles. So Sidney Rigdon he's not an apostle. He certainly has a lot of power in the church. He is going to declare himself to be essentially the protector of the church, a guardian of the church, with the idea being that when Joseph Smith's son becomes old enough, that he would then take over the church, that the church was to pass its authority essentially in a patriarchal fashion from father to son and on down. And there are lots of Latter-day Saints who, even if they don't back Rigdon's claim, feel similarly that we should honor Joseph by sending this with his children. There was already some of this idea inculcated among members because the office of patriarch, which was a highly elevated office, had only gone through the Smith family. It had been Father Smith had been the patriarch, and then Uncle John Smith had been the patriarch, and shortly after this, after Joseph and Hiram's murder, William Smith is going, and Hiram had been, so it had been a Smith kind of family calling, and so there's certainly some feeling of that. I think most Latter-day Saints know that there's a meeting that's held in August, and Sidney Rigdon presents his case for why he should be the guardian,
and Sidney hadn't even been in Nauvoo when this was happening.
He was in Pennsylvania.
He's gone to Pennsylvania, and when he finds out this happened, he rushes to Nauvoo.
And he gets there before some of the other saints do. And in fact, when Brigham Young arrives, when you're looking back on history, it's easy to know what's going to happen because you already know the answers. But when you're at the time period, you don't actually know. Brigham Young doesn't know when he first arrives back in Nauvoo that Sidney Rigdon's going to claim to be the new leader of the church. As far as he's assuming, Joseph gave the keys of the kingdom to the Quorum of the 12. People will recognize that, and Joseph and the Quorum of the 12 will now lead the church. Rigdon makes this public claim for this, and then Brigham Young will speak after him. One of Sidney Rigdon's arguments is that he is a member of the First Presidency and therefore equal in authority in the power of the presidency, and therefore he should have the power. He's undermined a great deal in that argument because Amos Lyman, who is also a member of the First Presidency, speaks on behalf of Brigham Young and says, well, I'm a member of the First Presidency too, so I have just as much power as you do, and I think Brigham's got
the keys.
So, although we talk a lot about that day, especially because, it's really when the mantle falls upon Brigham Young, very few Latter-day Saints in Nauvoo actually follow Sidney Rigdon. Several dozen, maybe into the hundreds. It's hard to tell because people aren't writing letters saying, by the way, I'm following Sidney Rigdon. But he leaves and he goes to Pennsylvania where he'll eventually establish a church. And it's sad in a way, I guess, but he actually gets excommunicated from his own church. So that's a rough one, right? If you found your own church and then you get excommunicated from it. But the other problem is that there is an elder in, he's in Illinois and Michigan and various places, but he claims to have a letter from Joseph saying, hey, if anything happens to me, you're the new head of the church. His name's James Strang. Strangism is actually going to be far more prevalent among people. Strang is going to claim that he's receiving revelations. He's going to claim that he's translating more of the Book of Mormon. Yeah, more of the Book of Mormon. He's going to claim that all kinds of these powerful, miraculous events. But for both of them, one of the draws for both of them, for members of the church, is Brigham Young is still determined to see that all of Joseph's doctrines that he taught are still being taught. So we're still having a temple endowment. We're still teaching work for the dead. We are still teaching eternal marriage and at least privately, plural marriage, right? Well, and we're going to leave the country. You are about to walk 1,000 miles if this is the person that you're following. And so there are a lot of people who gravitate primarily to James Strang and some to Sidney Rigdon's denomination. There are other offshoot groups that happen as well. But that's what's going on internally.